Hi, and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to look at the SCOR model and how you can use it. So at SupplyChainPlanning.ie, we talk quite a bit about the value of the SCOR model and how it can help companies and individuals to deliver improved supply chain performance. But it can be hard to see that if you haven't really gone through an example that shows you exactly how to do it. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to show right from the beginning of where exactly do you go to log on, how do you create your account, and then we're going to walk through a typical example that to me shows how you go through the use of the SCORE model and the value in it. Everything we're going to go through today is using completely free resources that are completely free for your use. So again, everything we go through today, it's open to you to use. Um, if your company you think can benefit from this, we do sell training and sell consulting in this exact area. So as we go through it, if you think that you would like to see this more in your own company, by all means send us an email and we can help make that happen. But really the focus of today is to just show you how you can use those free resources and to learn something new to help you get on. Okay, let's set the scene of a typical example. So let's say that we have a problem somewhere in our supply chain that's having a big impact. It's creating a lot of noise. So in this example, let's say we've got one of our warehouses where we appear to have a problem, that we have large amounts of stock that are having to be written off. And we're also then finding that it's impacting our reliability because we don't have the stock there that we expect. So it's creating a lot of problems. Typically in those environments, I'd say that we have a lot of people who want to do a really good job and have very strong opinions, probably differing opinions of what we need to do. So what I want to show in that case is, okay, how can we work through this using the SCORE model? How can we take a breath and step through this methodically to figure out what should we do and how can we reliably get to a point of improvement? Okay, so with that then, we're going to jump in now and we'll introduce the SCORE model. Okay, so to access the SCORE model, what we need to do is we need to go to this website here, ascm.org, and we look then for the corporate solutions and then SCORE digital standard. And we click on that, we just need to scroll down here and we can see these two options, Explore SCORE DS, which brings us to the SCORE model. And then we have this free course. And I'm going to click on the free course, which is a fantastic learning system which explains SCORE. So definitely recommend doing that. It's a great resource in itself and it's completely free to use. How you get there, if you click start here. Now, if you don't have an account, what it'll prompt you here is to say either log in or create an account. So again, if you want to create an account, it's as simple as clicking on this, providing an email address. It won't look for credit card information or anything at all like that. It's completely free for use so long as you've created your account. So do that if you haven't already done so. That training course with learning system is available, but I'll go back now and we'll just go back to the SCORE model, SCORE digital standard, and then if I click here on the Explore SCORE DS, this now is the SCORE model. Now this is something that a couple of years ago used to cost several €1,000 to get access to all the books, and used to be a several month training course around how you interpret the books. So you can see here now it's interactive, we've all the different elements about it, and just to touch on what we see here. So this is the SCORE model, which covers supply in terms of sourcing in from external suppliers, transform internal production, our demand from customers, so the orders from customers, fulfilling that demand. We've got the return leg, we've got the planning, how we synchronize all that, and the orchestrate around creating the conditions to control that supply chain. And basically, what one of the points here around the infinity loops around this is that actually, where in the past it used to be a cyclical set of steps, whereas really all of these things happen at the same time in the supply chain. That's typical that people would be used to. So that's what the model has changed to reflect. But we'll touch on each of the different elements of this as we go through our example. But if we remember, we were saying that we wanted to figure out, well, how can we help with our problem, which is related to our warehouse. So now we need to figure out, well, what's the first thing? How can we use this? So for any work that you do with SCOR, it always starts and ends with performance, with the metrics. So the SCOR model is very, very prescriptive that metrics are essential. So where we go to look at them first is we click on performance. And what we can see here then are a number of attributes around how we may assess the health of the supply chain. So again, in the example that we touched on, we're talking about something that's impacting stock write-off and it's impacting our ability to meet customer orders. So if I scroll down through those, there's certainly one potentially around reliability, where we go to pick and the product isn't there at all. There's probably an element as well around cost. You could say something around assets, but you can see here there's a couple of lenses, these attributes around supply chain health. And then we have these level one metrics. And with SCOR, you never skip the level one. You always start there, and we'll see an example of why you need to do that. The value on starting here is this answers the so what, because this is assessing how big of an impact. We might have a lot of noise on something, it might have an irrelevant impact on our overall health of the supply chain, just creating a lot of noise. So sometimes when people go through a project or an improvement, they actually dive into the improvement work. And then after the fact, when we have all of our proposals, then we have to try and justify, well, what impact is it going to make? So at SCOR, what you do is you start with the metric and understand at the level one, how is this impacting the health of our supply chain? And then we have level two metrics that's below them that can give an indication then for the diagnostic of, okay, so what type of an issue do we have? So if I was to look here, and we can see how interactive it is, if I say around reliability, you can see the amount of information there to explain every one of these. But if we said, well, our top level tier one here around perfect customer order fulfillment, we've got a way of calculating that here that's described, which is build up of the lower level metrics. And this is a consistent metric that I can benchmark against other peers, other industries, because again, it's a consistent method that's used across the world. Below my tier one, I have the tier two, so I've got perfect order here. Well, the second level would be, well, is it in full? Is it on time? Is it the documentation correct, etc.? So you can see there's deeper down levels that you can go to that help provide more information. The one I'm going to hone in on here is if I just say from a cost perspective. So we talked there about, well, we're writing off a lot of stock. So that's costing us money. So let's just try and understand. It's not to do with the cost of goods sold, because it's not in the direct material cost. It's actually a supply chain cost because we seem to be losing stock somewhere for whatever the reason is. So we're going to hone in on this tier one of total supply chain management cost. Now we can see here there is guidance on exactly how you should calculate this, the data collection, and then we've got the level twos below that. So if I'm trying to understand what's the scale of impact, where are we looking, if I can see here I've got order management cost. When I click through to any of these metrics, I can see a huge amount of information around the processes that might be impacted, what best practices companies have used to improve this metric. So you can see in any one of these, I click into it, I've got a world of information there, and it's quite interactive about how it's all connected. So if I can say, well, is it to do with order management cost? Is it to do with material acquisition costs around product coming in? Probably not. Inventory carrying cost. Now, there's something here in this one that if we say the cost associated with carrying inventory, opportunity, shrinkage, insurance taxes, obsolescence. So now I think this level two will probably give us most insight into the tier one. And then if I was to try and understand, well, what do these mean? So if I was to look at shrinkage, and I've got an explanation of each one, the costs associated with breakage, pilferage, deterioration of inventories. So I think this is a key one for our metric that we're looking at, our issue. If I look down as well, potentially total obsolescence, this also could be relevant. So I'm interested to see when we go through a bit more in the detail and build up the information. These are probably the areas that are going to give me the most information. But from a high level metric, I now have a level 2, a level 3 that's relevant for this topic. Okay, so to help with understand that example and how can we make this a bit more real, so in order to build up that picture for the total supply chain management cost, I need to understand what were the costs against each of those level twos. And if you saw the way the level one CO 1.1 is calculated, it is a combination of each of the different lower levels. Now, when you're going through this, part of the SCOR model is that I need to talk to other people around the supply chain in different functions, probably my finance business partners, to understand this information. And that's a very good idea because the more people we talk to, it's less about you as an individual having the answer. Canvass those different perspectives, bring in the financial information to get that sense of, well, how much of an issue is this and what is the so what around it. So if I looked here, for example, in this worked example that I have here, we have a total supply chain management cost of 1.6 million and our revenue is 10 million. And that's what it's telling us how to calculate this metric. So 16%. So the next thing we need to say is, but what are we going to do? So if we're going to fix, we're going to spend a lot of time looking into the issues that we're having and coming up with new ways of working and improvements. So what? How much is it worth to us? Because if we say, well, we've got a carrying cost that we reckon, we could save about 5%, maybe 6% on that. So if I say 6% reduction, €18,000, a negligible impact on this metric, maybe you just don't go down that route because there'd be so much work, so much challenge around improving it. And actually, we can see here when somebody ultimately has said, well, why are we doing this? It's not really a compelling argument. And we might get drawn to say, well, actually, we're going to really, because we think there's a lot of needless waste in here that we can remove it out, we're going to reduce it by half. So 150,000 reduction. And now we've got a 1.5% reduction in our cost, which would be going directly against the bottom line. So that now starts to give a sense of, well, is it worth us going after this? Because actually this tier one metric is something that anybody within the business will get and will get the reason for it. So before we've actually gone into any bit of the granular detail of what we're going to do, building up the picture for why it matters and the impact. But that's still at the tier one level. So if I went down to the tier two, and if I said, well, okay, so what's the information below that of, say, the inventory carrying costs? Well, I can see here we looked at the opportunity cost, shrinkage, etc. And maybe the picture here is, well, yes, it's still that standout cost that we're seeing here, but am I really going to impact insurance and taxes? And I can see there's something with finished goods that's not really going to change based on what we're doing here. So when I said we're going to reduce by 150, like we probably could reduce this by half, but we've probably overstated what we can do here because we're not going to impact these. So I went back to the tier one. I'd say probably a 90,000 reduction is probably more what we're looking at. So again, it's useful just to sense check what we're saying, the ambition, so we're not over promising and under delivering. But once we get clear to say, okay, so now we're getting quite precise on the metrics and why it matters and the impact we're going to have, then the tier 3 diagnostic would be, well, let's look at shrinkage. And now I'm looking at sort of weekly information here, which says, well, here's how the costs have come in. So now that's what I'm trying to understand. And really what we're actually doing is this metric here, it would continue at about nearly €4,000 per week. What we're trying to do from this point on is to start reducing it. Okay. And that's the impact we're going to see. What we'll see at the very end of it is if we're not seeing this number come down, there's something we're not quite getting. So that's what we're trying to do. And once we have this picture established, then we can move on to the next point. So now that we've got a good idea of where we're looking to focus, the impact we're looking to have, and whether it matters or not, really what we need to understand now is, well, what are the current processes? What's the as is picture? And what potential issues are there with it? And coming up with proposals on how we might change it. And to do that, we now look at the processes. So what we have here is a complete model of every process that you could have in a supply chain and the best practice way of how they get done, the elements within them, how they sequence themselves in best practice. So huge amount of information here that we can use to diagnose our current supply chain and come up with proposals. So if we look at the warehouse, which is the example we're looking at here, and if we say the source piece, if we look at source, we've got different options. So we're not talking about return, strategic, or indirect. We're talking about direct. And now I can see here there's a number of processes underneath S2 direct procure around creating the order, scheduling the product delivery, manage inbound transport, receive product. I'm going to click on that one. And within that, I can see information around that step. I can see some best practices that could probably do some of these already. There could be more in there that could help us improve as proposals. We've got different skills that people typically have in this area. So again, a lot of information that can help us diagnose, well, this is typically how a supply chain process would be fed, and this receiving step and what will come before it and what will come after it. So again, massive amounts of information here that I can click on and go through to understand. But to help again with this, what I'm going to show you is how we go through diagnosing the as is to get to an understanding of what we do, what issues we have, and then to start pulling some of those best practices to come up with real improvement plans. So let's stick with our example of the warehouse that we've been looking at and the issues. How can we diagnose the issues that we have there? Um, so again, sticking with the process model, we said, well, we're looking at the warehouse. What we need to do at a level 2 level is map a point in the supply chain and say, well, what feeds into it, what feeds from it. So I'm going to focus here on, it's a warehouse. We've got sourcing in, which is the S2 from external suppliers. We've got S2 sourcing in from intercompany locations, which could be a bit different. We've got production feeding into this warehouse. So we've got to fulfill B2B, and F2 is the process area that is covered in. We also have different supply chain feeding into it, which is the R1 return flows of materials. So if that talks about what comes into this point in the supply chain, we also then need to look at how products are moving out of it. So we've got the transform, picking and issuing products to manufacturing, fulfill customers, in this case B2B, but also fulfilling the intra-company demand, which could be slightly different. So again, with this, and it's a step you do with the SCOR model, you're trying to understand at that level 2 piece, what are the parts of the supply chain that are relevant. So we do that first before we go into lower levels. If you're doing it for a broader supply chain, you essentially just take each point and you say, well, what are the level 2 processes that apply here? We're only going to hone in on the areas that we think are most relevant. So to get to the level 3 then, we looked at some examples of those processes under, say, transform or source. So now what we're actually going to do is map them as what we think we're currently doing step by step. And we're going to put swim lanes, which is what these are called, say, well, here are the different functional areas of responsibility. So we can see here, if we go as an end-to-end warehouse, and we're not saying we stop at one function. So we've got the inbound transport, we've got the receiving, the inspection. Now, every one of these is a world within itself. We're saying here's how these parts feed through. We've got the transfer of product, and then we've got where we're issuing materials out from there. We receive product back from production, and then we've got our pick, pack, and dispatch processes. So that's, again, is just interviews, talking to different people. Again, I'd say it's not about you individually having the answer for all this. Talking to people across the supply chain, get more and more stakeholders, different people involved. And if we can all say, well, okay, this is how we do it, you're now bringing people on the journey with you. And if we took one, say, for example, let's just say this issue raw material components, for every one of these, what ASCM advises that you do, this thing is called a staple yourself to an order, which is, again, talk to the people who do the work, and then just go through, well, what are all the different level 4 steps? So the specific things that everybody does. And here it's a good example of a template that you can use and say, well, we're looking at this one process, and we can then see all the system steps, the non-system steps. We can see here, well, there should be a rule there that says, well, it's only 3 hours before production we're supposed to pick, but typically the informal rule is 15 minutes before. And actually, this person we were talking to is saying, well, look, there's a massive amount of issues here in this one area, and to spend a lot of time looking because people basically take a short option because they're under pressure. So capturing all that information, talking to multiple people about the process. Again, all you're doing, you're building a picture of the as is. It's critical that you have this level of detail, because any change we make will need to be at this level of detail. So you're getting yourself ready for the change by understanding the detail. And then when we make changes, when we take the best practices, we're able to say, well, exactly this step is going to change in exactly this way. But again, we've understood it. And a thing that I also note, which is interesting around this, is that I could have this process 1.3, and in each of my different manufacturing sites, it could be totally different. But now it's still 1.3, it's still the same core piece. But actually, this detail, even within a site, could be quite different. So again, it's important that you get to this level of detail. And once you get there, I think you then have quite a good understanding of the as is. If we're talking about fixing the problems, using the Ishikawa diagrams, the 5 whys, those best practices around trying to get to the root cause. What actually are we going to do that's going to improve? But then we looked at the best practices. So as we look at, say, we're talking about the issue raw materials, we've got these best practices there. Like, so Kanban, are we using Kanban? Is it something that's relevant? Is it something that we understand? So can we figure out what this means and see if it's applicable? Are there steps in the process that need to change? There's augmented reality. Have we tried all the other things? Here's another idea. Well, like, what does that mean? Who's doing that? So again, there's lots of, you can say, best practices, cutting edge technology here. This gets reviewed every year. It gets updated. So you can see here there's lots of really interesting perspectives here about how you can improve, and lots of support around understanding these best practices. And also on the people side, so if we talk about, say, inventory management, do our people actually understand the process? Do they understand inventory management? Is there training that they need? We say ERP. Are people trained on the use of the ERP system, or did they get an on-the-job training, 20 minutes, learning from somebody who has bad practices? So again, you can see all these different perspectives that can help identify, well, what are the areas that we could look at. And then once we've understood the as is, once we've diagnosed some potential issues, some proposals, we then start to take all that information and start to come up with, and again, workshops are really good for this, bring people into a room, say, well, at a high level, could we reconfigure this? We mentioned there's pain points and shrinkage. Could we actually restructure this so there's maybe a cross-docking step or something which is brought in, which actually eradicates any potential for this? So could we engineer it out altogether? In which case we say, if we do this, change the process in this way, the problem will be gone forever. So, and really took me years to get this point from ASCM. Is really what they're trying to get us to do is to think in this way around how we could reimagine our supply chain. And this is how we can do it. We can structure the pieces differently, and come up with a totally different way of completing our processes. Or say, based on the best practices that we've identified, maybe our level 3 processes are actually fine, but we just need to reconfigure them based on some proposals for changes, best practices. So again, it's from building up that picture of having a clear view of what are we moving to. And when we have all of those different options, what we can see here, and this is again proposal or suggestion for the way to go through it, is to come back to the metrics. Our baseline that we looked at here, the 16%, we've got €185,000 a year on shrinkage. Our target is that we're going to get it down to 90. We're going to get this down to 15%. So for all of our different proposals, what are the things that we're going to do is to list them out. What are we going to do? What is the cost of doing that? Everything has a cost. It's time. We're taking people out, maybe providing training, we're investing in a system, we're investing in understanding a new capability. Everything has a cost of time or of money. What level of complexity is it? And then again, back to those metrics. Will this make an impact on our metric or not? If we can't see it impacting the metric, it's hard to justify it. They could help, but again, just trying to focus us back to how will it drive the metrics that we're looking at? How will it deliver us the impact that we want? And as part of that, this quadrant here is a really great way of just assigning which of the projects we're going to go for. And all this is really doing, this is building up your business case. Don't do this on your own. All the people you've used all the way along can help inform this picture. Now, note here with all this, you still haven't actually tried to change anything. But what have you done? This is Change Management 101. You've defined the scale of the impact, you've understood the so what, you've described the benefit, why it matters, what we're trying to get to. We've worked with lots of people cross-function, we've got lots of different outcome or perspectives, we've defined what our baseline is, how we're going to track post-implementation of the impact. We've understood the as is, so any change impacts, we've brought those out and we've talked to people who are going to be the most impacted by the change and they've been involved in it. We've got impartiality around how we've extracted points to improve. We haven't gone in with an agenda. And then we've developed our ideas based on global best practices. So we've got a lot of different perspectives, the latest technologies, all these different views informing how we think we should go on. We've worked through the proposals to the 2B state. We haven't come up with that ourselves. And we've developed a business case with approval sign-off, leadership sign-off for our budget, the next steps, how we want to navigate that. And then as well, we've prepared for the change by working with all the colleagues to ensure that there's a shared sense of need. So again, we're not on a solo run as you hear people talk. So again, like everything there means that you've stacked things in your favor that we will get there. But again, I come back to where the score goes. It starts with metrics, it ends with metrics. Everything we're doing is because we expect a metric to change. So when we do the implementation of the 4, 5, 6 things that we said we're going to do, this number needs to come down. If it's not coming down, we need to understand that. Cannot move on to the next project, the next area, until this metric comes down because there's something we're not understanding. That's a fundamental point. It's all about the metrics and understanding how we can affect this change. But you get quicker over time at it, you get better at it the more you go through this. And then if you think what we've covered here around improving a part of a supply chain around a warehouse, imagine then if you build that capability about what it could be to say, well, actually, we now want to change our environmental impact and the level of waste, or a factor around diversity inclusion, for example. And we say we're going to take the exact same approach. So the art of the possible then really becomes quite compelling about how you can use the exact same process and build the confidence that you're going to get there. So that concludes today's webinar. I hope it wasn't too much. But I think it really just shows you what an invaluable tool SCOR can be. As you say, if as you're going through this, you say, well, our company could really do with this. Just to be clear, like we do provide training, we do provide consulting, to help a company to go through such a journey. So by all means, send us an email and we can help make that happen. But today was more around using the free resources. Everything we've gone through today is completely free. So our point is use it. It's such an invaluable resource. All right. Any questions? Don't be afraid to contact us. The very best of luck, and I hope it really helps you.